Yeah, so welcome again officially, Emily, to Venus Codes, my podcast. You're my first guest in season 3 and my first international guest. And yeah, I'm very excited, as I just told you. Yeah, I'm gonna have done a little introduction on you when the listeners hear this, but yeah, maybe from your side, I know you as an astrologer. But yeah, what do you do and how did you come to doing this work?
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be your first international guest. Thank you. Um, and, I got into astrology when I was 13, and I read Linda Goodman's Sun Signs book, which was, in the 70s. That was a big mainstream phenomenon.
Okay.
And something just spoke to me. And it wasn't like from that point on, I decided this would be my career. I loved astrology. It was my secret passion, but I was on a trajectory to be an academic. And I always knew I wanted to teach and I wanted to write. So that was my direction. But then during my Saturn return, which for those who don't know is around age 29, I found myself living in New York City, and I studied with an astrology teacher for the first time, and I was just completely on fire with astrology. I was so passionate about it. It was all I could think about. And I started doing readings for friends, and it just kind of grew organically from there. So that's been more than 20 years now that I've been practicing professionally. And I feel so grateful I get to do work that I love and that I think is useful and of service. So I work with clients, I teach about astrology, and I think, so some of the teaching I do about astrology is about how to do astrology, but a lot of it is about what are the current energies and how to align with them. And I think that's part of my forte as an astrologer. And part of what I love about astrology so much is just like what's available energetically and how can we best go with the flow instead of pushing the river? What is this time about? And I'll just say that I have two parallel work paths. One is in creative writing, and I also lead creative writing workshops now virtually. And then also energy medicine. Also during my Saturn return, I started studying and practicing energy medicine, and that's really informed how I do astrology as well. I really think of astrology as a healing art, or that's how I practice it and intend to practice it. So that's a long answer to your question.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And yeah, in preparation to our talk today, I listened to a class of yours again. And you were talking actually about energy medicine, and I didn't plan to ask you about this, but here we go. Can you just describe what is it, energy medicine?
Well, how I got into it is I was a very sickly child and had all kinds of things in and out of the hospital. And when I was 19, I ended up getting a parasite. And after medication, I then had all these symptoms. And I went from doctor to doctor and got absolutely nowhere, basically. And so I went to see a naturopath for the first time when I was 19, and just that started me on this path of natural healing. And then when I was in my Saturn return, I was having all kinds of symptoms, and I was working with, a chiropractor and acupuncture and massage and diet and trying to do all these natural healing things. And then a friend of mine offered a session in polarity therapy, which I had never heard of. It's a form of energy work. And I said, sure, whatever. And 15 minutes later, I have no idea what happened. It seemed like he didn't really do anything. But 15 minutes later, my symptoms were gone. And I said, what the hell was that? And as it turned out, I enrolled in a training program for polarity therapy, a 9-month training program after that session, because it worked. I didn't know what it was, but it worked. And essentially, the idea with energy medicine is that we know from quantum physics that energy steps down into matter. Everything begins as energy. So if we've got something going on in the body, we can treat it at a body level, but it's probably going to come back again because we're not getting to the source. And, I like to talk about how I'm a Virgo. I'm very Virgo, and Virgo's all about getting to the essence and being, efficient, right? So to me, energy medicine is very efficient by getting to the core of what's happening and addressing the energy so that the body will recreate itself in a new way based on that new energetic imprint. So that's been my main form of healing, for the past 20 years, just because it works. And even though it seems like the most woo-woo out there, intangible thing, for me, it's the most practical because it gets to the source.
Yeah. Wow. That's so exciting. Interesting. Yeah.
And I just wanted to say too, in terms of astrology, that I think one of the things that's so cool about astrology is it's, if we're looking at somebody's birth chart, it's a map of energy, right? Or if we're looking at the current astrology, it's a map of energy. So that's the relationship for me between the energy medicine and being an astrologer is it's all about working with energy. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I love it. It's so interesting. And do you offer, like, you weave it into your astro sessions, this, what's it called, energy medicine, or is it this, do you have sessions only for energy medicine, or is it all woven together?
I used to have a practice in body talk, which is the form of energy medicine I ended up getting into later. And then I also used to put together astrology and body talk and do sessions that combine the two. I don't practice energy medicine anymore professionally. I just do it for myself and friends and animal friends. But I feel like it's my training and practice in energy medicine informs how I approach my astrology readings. So even though it's not an energy medicine session, I feel like that's where I'm coming from, or that's kind of the foundation of how I work with clients. Okay,
I get it. Yeah, astrology. As I mentioned, I know you as an astrologer. I don't know how I found you or your work found me. It's been a couple of years ago. And yeah, there's something outstanding to me in your work that I just love. And but what I didn't know when I found you and already loved your newsletters and everything, I find them so, even they're not like long articles, because they are just describing about the current energies, and normally each new moon and full moon, I think you send one, and they are not like that long, but they are so rich, and I love them. Even before I got to work closer with you or buy classes, your newsletters I just love them. And what
thank you.
Yeah, I really do. And what I just found out this year, just like a couple of months ago, that's so interesting, that you already did some did some in-depth research and work with Mary Magdalene and Venus, which, like, Mary Magdalene to me feels like my main guide. So I think we always feel, I didn't know this about you, but there was this match in energy, I think, that attracted me years ago. And my question is, how did that come? How did Mary Magdalene and Venus come to you and your work?
Yeah, well, what happened was, this was about a decade ago, I think in 2011, where I had been hearing so much about the return of the goddess and the return of the divine feminine. And I was also feeling that, but I didn't know exactly what that meant, or how do we work with that? What do we do with that? Because my sense was, if the goddess is coming back, if the divine feminine is coming back, it's not a spectator sport. It's not like, oh, there she is. Hi, welcome back. We're glad you're back. You know, it's more like, if she's coming back through us, right? We're the agents of divine energies on earth. We're the ones with bodies who can actually bring through certain energies. So I wanted to understand, okay, first of all, what is the feminine, right? Because there's so many ideas, a lot of different ideas floating around about what does that even mean. I wanted to understand what is the feminine, and what is the feminine for me, and how do I bring this divine feminine more online. And since I'm an astrologer, I thought, okay, let's start with Venus, since Venus is the planet that's been associated with the goddess for thousands of years, at least 5,000 years, as far as we know. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do an in-depth study of Venus, and I called it my Venus project, and I committed to apprenticing myself to Venus. And what happened was, as I was starting out on this project, and I had carved out a month where I was going to go, I went to live by the ocean and just really devoted, you know, that was how I launched the project. You know, Venus was born from the ocean, Venus Aphrodite, born from the ocean. So, okay. And as I was starting out, it completely surprised me that Mary Magdalene came in. And I had been hearing a lot about Mary Magdalene, of course, like all these books coming out about her and this and that. And I was not interested. I was like, this has nothing to do with me. I didn't grow up going to church. My mom is an atheist. You know, I found my own spiritual path that had nothing to do with Christianity, whatever, couldn't care less. But what happened was, before I left for my, you know, Venus project launch, I was in a bookstore, and this book, you know, when books just like jump out at you and hit you. So this book on Mary Magdalene by Lynn Picknett, maybe you've seen it. It's called Mary Magdalene, Christianity's Hidden Goddess. It just kind of hit me over the head, and I was consumed by it. And then I got it. And it seemed obvious once I got it, but, you know, in the bigger picture of astrology, as I know you know, we're in the turning of the ages. We're ending the age of Pisces. We're coming into the age of Aquarius, right? And the age of Pisces has been going on for about 2,000 years. And the idea is that the age of Pisces started around the time of the birth of Christ. And of course, Christianity is completely infused with Piscean imagery. Pisces is the fish, right? The symbol for Christianity is the fish. So as we come out of the age of Pisces, we have to heal the Pisces age distortions in order to successfully move into the next age, in order to move into Aquarius. And the core, and I know you've heard me talk about this, and you know, I could go on for hours about this, but I'll get to the core here. To me, the core of the distortion in the Pisces age is the split between matter and spirit, and between God and goddess. And what tends to happen during a particular age is there's an exaltation of the dominant sign, Pisces, and Pisces represents pure consciousness, spirit, transcendence, right? This realm of pure energy. And the opposite sign, Virgo, represents the goddess. Virgo is an earth sign. It's about embodying the divine on earth. And in the old paradigm of the goddess religion, there was no separation. The idea was that we are embodiments of the divine, and the priestesses of the goddess would work with sacred sexuality. So sexuality was sacred, Why? Because it's what creates life, and life was sacred, right? And instead, we have this distorted relationship with spirit where we're waiting to get up there. You know, the body is dirty, sexuality is dirty, we're born of sin, so you know we're like screwed from the beginning. There's something wrong with us from the get-go. No-win situation here, and we're all waiting to die. And you know, I think it's Lynn Picknett, oh no, maybe it's Merlin Stone and When God Was a Woman, who talks about how when archaeologists of the 1800s started finding those Venus figures, those little goddess figurines, and they said, oh, well, it's a fertility cult. You know, oh, these are from a fertility cult. Well, actually, it's from a whole religion called the goddess religion, but okay. But I think it's Merlin Stone who says, you know, archaeologists of the future, when they're excavating Christian relics, might call it a sterility cult, right? The priests are celibate, sex is bad, you know, anti-life. So to me, coming back to Mary Magdalene, what I learned, and I ended up doing an in-depth study of early Christianity and the original Christian gospels that were suppressed by the Roman Catholic Church, and looking at the history of what Christianity was in the beginning and how it was distorted and co-opted by the Roman Empire to be a tool of control instead of a tool of liberation, because I think Christ was here not to be worshipped, but as an avatar and to show us how it's done, to be, as Andrew Harvey says, to be our evolutionary brother, right? Not to be up there. And this is, sorry, my mind went in 4 places. But so originally, Mary Magdalene, from what I understand, was an equal to Christ, that they worked together. And there's nothing in Christ's original teachings that is anti-woman or anti-body or anti-sexuality or any of that. And in fact, you know, it's very mysterious who knows what actually happened. But I think, you know, the stories that we tell are important at this point. And the story that makes the most sense to me is that Mary Magdalene and Christ worked together through sacred sexuality, actually, that they had trained in and were high initiates in order to enable Christ to do the, you know, transfiguration and all of that. So that Mary Magdalene was actually an essential part of early Christianity. So to me, the return of Mary Magdalene at this point, and of course she's everywhere, right? And once I started looking at, there were so many books about her and so much information, and there's just, you know, she's just flooding our consciousness because we need the feminine, we need the body, we need to honor the body and the earth, right? I mean, part of the distortion of the Pisces age is that the earth doesn't matter because heaven's up there. And I think from my perspective, heaven is right here. We're meant to create heaven on earth. We don't need to die to get to heaven. We're here to create it on earth. And so Mary Magdalene is coming back to say, honor the body, honor the earth. There's nothing wrong with our sexuality or with life. You know, we have such an assault on life happening now in so many different forms. And so we need to honor life in order to make a healthy transition into the age of Aquarius. Again, a long answer there.
Yeah, thank you. I love it. So would you say, like Mary Magdalene and Venus, I'm just, right now my mind goes places like, who is Venus and who's Mary Magdalene, but maybe that's not, maybe you want to say something about this, but like Mary Magdalene is our savior of the new age, but not like, and like we misunderstood Jesus and we just put him up there instead of looking him in the eye and receiving his teachings. Like somehow if we get her right, like Mary Magdalene or the goddess, the great mother, if we get her right and understand her teaching this time around, would you say that's the crucial thing, or one of the crucial things, like to prevent humankind from a big disaster? Or
yeah, essentially, yeah. And I like what you're saying, because we don't want to do to Mary Magdalene what the culture has done to Jesus, right? This isn't about worshiping the goddess. And again, this is a big distortion of the Pisces age, that God or goddess or the divine is out there, right, in any form. And I don't think, like maybe it's a step up if we're acknowledging the feminine face of the divine. Okay, that's something. But if we're not acknowledging the divine within ourselves and the potential to be the divine on earth and embody that energy, then we're just repeating the same old distortion and not getting anywhere. And so, yeah, I think we are in a very dire place right now. And especially over the last year and a half, we've seen a kind of ramping up acceleration of what I would call the distorted version of the Aquarian age, which, Aquarius is the sign of technology. Nothing wrong with technology, right? That's technology is neutral. And to me, the higher expression or conscious expression of the Aquarian age is recognizing what incredible technological feats our bodies are, and working with natural technologies that our ancient ancestors knew how to work with. If you've been to like the stone circles, these massive stones, some of which weigh like 4 tons, that were moved from hundreds of miles away. Well, how, 6,000 years ago, how did they do that? They had technology that we've lost. And that's technology of working with natural forces, working with sound, working with energy, working with light. That's not the kind of technology that goes against nature or destroys nature in the process. So in the distorted version of the Aquarian age, it's, what I think about it is, it's the technocracy. It's a totalitarian surveillance state where we're constantly on we're merged with artificial intelligence, with computers, with that whole field. It's basically turning our bodies into machines and living in a virtual reality and machine world. And we've had a lot of, predictive programming in the media about what the future is going to look like. The future is virtual reality, and it's not embodied, and it's all in the mind, right? So yeah, that's not the version I want to live in. And I think what's happening now is that both versions are coming online, because there are people who are really committed to, wait a minute, we got to go back to the earth. I need to learn how to grow my own food and take care of my body, and wake up to the miracle of the body. And this is, again, something I've, where I'm coming from in terms of energy medicine, is really acknowledging that the body is a miraculous self-healing mechanism and knows what it's doing, right? The body knows. And so to me, like the conscious or high vibe version of the Aquarian age is recognizing and awakening to and liberating the technology that's already within us. And for, where I want to go in the Aquarian age is staying in the body while awakening, and there's messaging out there that, oh, if we if we merge with computers or get these implants or rely on artificial intelligence, that's all so much better. That's so superior to our, faulty, imperfect human selves, which to me goes back to that messaging, that distorted Pisces age messaging of there's something wrong with us. We're a mistake. Beings are, we're wrong. We're mistaken. We're faulty.
Yeah.
Someone messed up when they created us, or we're some weird, evolutionary mistake. And yeah, that's not my truth, and that's not what I'm committed to. I'm committed to the opposite.
Yeah, same. Yeah, that's also interesting. I just lost my my line of thoughts here. What I really loved also about as I said, I received your newsletters for years now, and what I really loved is this point that you already just made, that like the future is not set. Like the Age of Aquarius is not something that will save us and it's all gonna be fine, because in the spiritual bubbles also we have this story, like we're going into the Age of Aquarius and everything is gonna be fine, like we don't have to do anything, like that, which is a very disempowering view of us humans. Like it's again,
Right.
if we say it's all already set and it's gonna be fine, la 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 la, and then we all again just put our power to an outside source, right? And what I always loved about your newsletters is, for me, it came through that it's our choice, like what we make of this new time, of this new era. Like you just explained what would be like a high vibe Age of Aquarius and what might be a more distorted one. And yeah, I just love that you always, for me, just showed up or made clear that it's not set in stone, whatever is going to happen. And we're actually creators and creatrixes who are going to create this new earth, right? And yeah, I think that's also important, or that's how astrology makes sense to me, to see energies as potentials, right? And it's not, how do you say that? Fortune telling.
Exactly. And this is, coming back to the idea that astrology is describing energy, and energy is neutral. There's no good energy or bad energy. It's just energy. And so what do we do with it, right? It's like, how do we work with the energy that's available? And I think, what you're saying, this sort of victim consciousness that comes into the new age world, the spiritual world, anytime we're waiting for something or someone to save us, right? And that's the old Pisces paradigm, whether it, and it's like Jesus is coming back to save us, or the aliens are coming to save us, like, no, because there's so much that's projected outside of ourselves, right? Where I think the real Aquarian age awakening and liberation, it's an inside job. It is ultimately an inside job for each of us. That's what's going to determine where we get. And of course, we're all connected. And this is part of this is another teaching of Pisces that we need to get before we go into Aquarius. Pisces is the sign of oneness and unity consciousness, right? And that distortion comes when, if God is out there and I'm down here, then that's not oneness, right? We are source. We're individual expressions of source consciousness. We're not separate, and we're not separate from each other. And I think, we see as things get more Aquarian, we see one version of that with this hyper connectivity, right? Through the internet, through technology. Oh, we're so connected. Oh, we need 5G so we can all be connected at all times anywhere on Earth, which to me is a distortion. It's an outpicturing, like an externalization of the fact that we're already connected. I don't need the wires and the, I mean, it's super cool that we can have this conversation between Germany and Colorado, and great, but we're already connected. We're already in the same field. And again, when we, or as we awaken to our inherent technology, we become more psychic. And we don't need to pick up a cell phone. I can send you a telepathic message, you know, or even like you were saying, like you had no idea I did all this work on Venus and Mary Magdalene, but somehow you were drawn to my work, and here we are, right? We're all in the field, you know. So I think in the high vibe Aquarian age, we'll be working with, you know, crystals and just directly with energy and telepathy, and be able to do the same things that we're doing with this, you know, machine technology without the machines. We already have that.
Yeah. Totally. I see it like you. Do you have like, I mean, I think, no, I don't think. I always say I think, but I feel. I feel like this time, 2021, I don't know how you feel that or how you've experienced this year, but for me, energy-wise, it's been more intense than 2020. I just didn't expect that, because also personally, I've been through quite some stuff internally in 2020, which was good, like all the distortions inside of myself, like coming up to leave my system. So it's good, but it's not comfortable. And then this 2021 comes, and I feel it's even more intense. And that's also what I hear from my community. I work with women, as you know, and I hear from the women, for them it's also more intense. And like, I know you're an astrologer, and maybe the answer doesn't come from astrology, but I know you're also an incredibly wise woman. So what would you say, how can we navigate these intense times? Like what can be our anchors, if you want?
Yeah, great question. And I totally agree with you, or had a similar experience, where I think 2020 was characterized by so much of that Capricorn energy, which is very, very much the hermit and going in. And of course, I think it was Matt Kahn who said we're on a global meditation retreat that nobody signed up for in 2020, right? Where a lot of us, we're in the cauldron of having to confront ourselves and be alone with ourselves, or with, you know, I know people in relationships or families where suddenly we all have to deal with each other instead of being, you know, we're going to have to confront the issues that we've been able to ignore because we're all so busy doing other things. So very deep, I mean, incredibly transformative time for a lot of people. That potential was certainly there. And then I think 2021, to me, this has been a lot about the battle of what is the Age of Aquarius going to look like. And I say that because the two rulers of the sign Aquarius, Saturn and Uranus, the traditional and modern rulers of Aquarius, are clashing this year. They're in a square formation, and there's this struggle between control and freedom, and the rising polarization and maybe just a splitting of the worlds, with people going in choosing which direction they're going to go in, whether that choice is conscious or unconscious. but we see this splitting of the worlds and splitting of, you know, friendships and couples and family members as they go in different directions. And so, and which is of course very uncomfortable and also very extreme. The energies this year are extreme and pushing us to choose our direction and commit and really go for it. If we are, you know, going in the direction of honoring the earth and the body and our natural wisdom and ourselves as these miraculous instruments, then that means, I mean, for me, that's meant taking steps to get off the grid and out of the matrix and start creating the new world and really taking responsibility for being the creators of the world that we want to live in. Because again, it's not like waiting around for the new world to come in. You know, come on, I'm ready, bring it. It's like getting busy and saying, okay, how, I certainly didn't learn any useful skills. I mean, I had a great education in my mind and learned how to, I don't know, analyze literature and stuff, but did I learn how to grow food or make my own medicine or build community? No. A lot of us have a real growth edge when it comes to creating the Aquarian age that we want to live in, because Aquarius is a lot about community and teamwork and true connectivity, and not this, you know, like I was saying, we have this technological connectivity that has left a lot of people feeling really isolated. It's, I mean, again, like I love that we can have this conversation, and I love the connections I have with people all over the world via this technology. Brilliant. And as humans, we need in person, in the body, we need those kinds of connections for our basic health and well-being, right? So that's what we're, you know, the real Aquarian age, or the Aquarian age I want. It's a lot about human beings coming together and learning how to work together. Hey, I have this skill, you have that skill. Let's, you know, what's the synergy that happens when we bring those creative gifts together and create the new world. So yeah, so very, very uncomfortable year energetically for sure. And I think there's a lot around responsibility and really having to take, you know, as the old systems are collapsing because they've reached their end game energetically. It can't, you know, as we know, that whatever's unsustainable has to fall apart at this point. And this is the bigger theme of Pluto, god, goddess of death and rebirth, Kali, the destroyer, in Capricorn, the sign of social systems and structures. They have to fall apart. And as they fall apart, we have to step up individually and take responsibility for creating those new systems. It's the same thing. It's like, well, what if someone isn't coming to collect my garbage? Or what if the power grid goes out? How do I create my own power in a way that is not harmful to the earth? And right, we're having to learn how to do those things. And that's uncomfortable. And that's a big learning edge, right? And we're having to figure it out pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't ask you, so I sent you before we met, I sent you my topics, my questions. So I didn't ask you about this question. I didn't write you about this question. So if you're not prepared to answer, that's fine. But just comes to my mind. What is if we have the Saturn-Uranus square, which is really the predominant energy this year, what can we expect from 2022? Do you have that on your radar now? Can you give us an answer to that?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I just remembered that I didn't answer the question that you asked before about what can we do, or what's helpful to do. So I want to, that's a great question and an important one. So I want to address that first, and then I'll shift. So I think in terms of what to do, I mean, partly it is about the responsibility piece, but I think there's a lot around staying present, because Aquarius, and as we have a lot of Aquarian energy really stirring and accelerating, Aquarius is the sign of the future. And one of the distortions of Aquarius is not being present, because our mind is, 10 years ahead in the future and freaking out about the future.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of fear of the future and a lot of projecting into the future, right? So I think, and this is something that I'm continually reminding myself, and I have a good friend who we keep reminding each other, our job is just to stay present. Oh, right, staying present, back to the present. So coming back to the present and what's true, what's real right here, right now. So grounding in the present. I think also the breath, and the breath is such a great tool for coming into the present. And Aquarius is an air sign, so air my breath. So I've certainly become a lot more conscious of breathing over the past year, and really leaning into breath work and practices. We don't really learn how to breathe well. At least I never learned how to breathe well. And there's a kind of trauma response where we hold our breath, and a stress response where most of us are not breathing well, or in a way that's really going to support our bodies to heal. Our bodies need to be in a restful, relaxed state in order to heal, in order to do what they know how to do. And breath is a way to work with that. So so body, presence, breath, all very important to stay grounded. And I think connecting with the earth in a very direct way, putting our bare feet on the ground. As we know, there are so many healing benefits we're now becoming aware of in terms of, earthing, putting bare feet on the ground. And that's a great way to come back to the present as well. So those are some of my thoughts about, how to work with the energies, because the energies are very chaotic and destabilizing, and that brings us out of our bodies and up in our heads and freak out.
Totally.
So, and in terms of next year, I mean, I think there's a continuation of a lot of the themes that we're working with, in terms of Saturn continues to be in Aquarius, and determining how are we creating this new Aquarian age. I think also next year, what's been operating in the background, and I think becomes more highlighted and important next year, is Neptune in Pisces. And Neptune moves very slowly. It's been in Pisces since I think 2010 or 2011, and it's there for another maybe 5 years. And Neptune is the great dissolver. And one of the ways I think about Neptune being in Pisces is about dissolving the distortions of the Pisces age, so that, this like purification process. And as we're dissolving those distortions, we're seeing the unconscious material. Neptune and Pisces are also associated with the unconscious, coming up more strongly. So the victim consciousness, the projection of power outside of ourselves, addiction, escapism, denial, delusion. There's a lot about how the collective is caught up in a dream. There's a dream spell that's been cast that's taken us out of, where people believe what they're told more than they believe what's right in front of them. We've been taught not to trust our senses and trust our own experience, and instead, again, the victim consciousness, trusting what someone is telling us, what an expert or authority is telling us, overriding our own, real-time experience. So I think next year, those energies expand, get even stronger, where it becomes so important for us to reclaim our power to create the dream, right? To use our imaginations in healthy and positive ways. I mean, well, I'll speak for myself. I often use my imagination in not very healthy ways, in terms of going into worry and anxiety and fear and oh my God, this could happen and that could happen, versus this is the dream that I'm intending. Again, coming back to energy, everything is energy. Neptune, Pisces, that's a lot about what's the energetic imprint. We need to have the vision and the imagination of the world we want to create. And this is something that Caroline Casey, who's one of my favorite astrologers, she says, imagination, Neptune, lays the tracks for the reality train. Reality, Saturn, the planet of manifestation. So we have to, I think this is something we're very deficient in as a culture, being able to imagine what does that more beautiful world look like. We're bombarded with images of the apocalypse. I mean, pretty much every Hollywood movie out there that's about the future is the technocratic, dystopian, apocalyptic future. Where are the images or stories about the beautiful future? They're not out there, so we need to create them. It's very important to hold the vision and use our imaginations to create that energetic blueprint. And this is, again, a growth edge. It's a muscle that a lot of us have not been taught to develop. And it's incredibly important, and we ignore that at our peril. I think this is a really important part of where we're headed. So reclaiming our imagination and our power to create the dream. And maybe you've heard me say this before, but I think it's really important to remember that at that level of creating the dream, the collective dream, we all have exactly the same amount of power. I don't care if you are, living on the street or completely broke or in whatever, situation. You have just as much power as, the president or the king or whatever. We all have that same power, but we don't have the power if we're not using it. So I think reclaiming the power of our imagination and our power to dream and vision becomes even more important next year. So that's one thought in terms of 2022.
Yeah, and it fits perfectly with like what you said earlier, that it's about also that Mary Magdalene is coming to teach us to recognize the divine within. And this divine within has the power to hold those beautiful visions and like manifest them over the years. Like, it's all connected.
Yes, absolutely.
That's so beautiful. Yeah. Oh, I've got one more question here, but maybe it's not a question. Maybe it's just something I want to mention, because in this webinar, I will link it. I saw it still in your shop. Mary Magdalene, Venus, and the Closing Piscean Age. I love this one. I just listened to it earlier and today, but when I first listened to it a couple of months ago, I was like, yes. I was just like, yes, that's so beautiful and wise and true. But one thing I didn't know, I mean, there were several things I didn't know, but what really stood out to me is that you mentioned that in, I don't know which era, some earlier times, Morning Star Venus was seen as the warrior goddess. And maybe it's not a question really, but when you said that, I just felt so much confirmation, because Venus is one of my guiding energies, and one of my biggest courses is called Warrioress of Love. And I have got really, and it's
Ah.
about like building a spiritual or like a conscious business and going for your calling and so on. And this name just came to me. I didn't make it up, even as same as Venus codes for my podcast. It just was there. And I was just a little bit like, I don't want to call my course like with war in it. What's what's that? But when you just said Venus was seen as the, or what is morning star Venus was seen as the warrior goddess, it just makes so much sense, because I think also like what we think of, or mainstream thinks of Venus or Aphrodite or whoever goddess, it's also so distorted. Like when you have, it's just the goddess of love and we are so soft and we make you fall in love, la 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 la. No, that's not only the feminine, right? I mean, yeah, and I just loved hearing you say this, because I think when we really also as women in this incarnation come back into our real true whole power, we need to embody also this warrior goddess, like also the fierce, also like something like a lioness, a fierce mother, maybe saying stop, like enough is enough. And yeah,
Yes.
just your talk gave me so much confirmation for my course having the word war in it. But yeah, I love.
Yeah. Yeah, and this was surprising to me too when I, set out on my Venus project. What is the feminine? Well, let's dive into Venus and see what's up. And when I said at the beginning that Venus has been associated with the divine feminine for at least 5,000 years, we know that because of these Sumerian tablets that are from 5,000 years ago that tell the story of the goddess Inanna, the queen of heaven and earth. And the story of Inanna is the story of Venus's cycle. And this is true for many, many myths and stories in the world. They're actually stories about the sky, because our ancient ancestors, instead of watching television at night, they watched the sky. And in terms of Inanna and Venus Inanna, when Venus appeared as the morning star, they saw her as a very different, almost like a different entity than Venus as an evening star. And just for the people who aren't familiar, basically, Venus is either visible just before sunset, or sorry, just before sunrise, kind of announcing the rising of the sun, or Venus is visible after sunset as the evening star. And so the ancients saw these as two different goddesses, where the morning star Venus is, this fierce feminine, the warrior goddess. And this was, a great, reframe for me. And as an astrologer, of course, astrology reflects the culture that it's practiced in. And so there are a lot of, underlying patriarchal assumptions, or underlying patriarchal paradigm to how astrology is practiced in the modern world. And of course, this is shifting as we're coming out of that. But the portrayal of Venus, the astrological Venus, as all passive and pleasing and compliant, that can be one version of Venus. But there's the, like you're saying, the fierce feminine. And I think we do need that warrior goddess online right now, right? Like, just the passivity isn't gonna get us too far right now. We need to be asserting that we need to be warriors of love, right? And really asserting that feminine energy. And I'll say too that another way to think about it, and this is a perspective I got from Adam Gainsbourg, an astrologer who's done a lot of really beautiful work on Venus's cycle, and Venus going through her different phases. He talks about morning star Venus as, on a personal level, it's a lot about discovering ourselves and our own subjective experience of the feminine. So that energy of self-discovery and self-assertion and self-exploration, you know, more of a focus on the self. And then evening star Venus, okay, having discovered our own feminine expression, evening star Venus is then, which the ancients saw as the lover version of Venus. That's about expressing that feminine. How are we bringing our feminine gifts to the world, and coming from more of that universal place to share what we've discovered in the self-discovery phase. And I think this is another place where, you know, culturally, women have been conditioned to be all about the giving it out, but not about like, wait, first I need to focus on myself and really cultivate my own, where am I coming from? And so I think that's another part of that warrior goddess that we need that, you know, quote, selfishness before we can give of ourselves in a really authentic and, you know, the highest expression, you know, to be of service in the way that we really came here to be of service, to know ourselves first. So that's, yeah, another way to think about it.
Yeah, beautiful. I love it. Yeah, I think all my topics and questions are done. Is there anything that comes to you that still wants to be said?
I don't think so. We covered a lot, and I'm just so grateful to be able to have this conversation with you. And I wish I spoke German and could listen to your podcast.
Thank you.
I love that.
I'm very grateful. So I will, yeah, put all the links to your beautiful classes, and that so people can know how they can find you. I will put that in the description. And you're not on social media anymore. That's maybe...
No, this was part of my 2020 technological detox, where I just, and maybe with Saturn, the planet of integrity, being in Aquarius technology, I really felt that strongly, where I felt like I can no longer, I don't want to support institutions like Facebook. I don't want to be a part of that. That feels out of integrity for me. So I got off of social media, and so you can't find me there.
No, but you have a beautiful website and a newsletter that I highly recommend. And you had a big audience on Facebook. I just checked. I mean, that's also brave to leave that behind, also like business-wise. But yeah, obviously it was a success for you, right? It was good.
It was, and I really, it felt like a leap of faith, and it felt like trusting that if I'm in integrity, the universe is going to support that. Come on, right? The goddess supports me in being in my integrity in business, and I did not suffer at all business-wise. Giving up my Facebook page.
Oh my God, I love that. That's such a beautiful like last message for this talk, because I'm at this moment, I'm just coming out of like a 6 to 8 week like pause, and I didn't do any communications. And because I also for me, I realized I can't do it. Like it was too patriarchal. Still, it wasn't patriarchal like we know people doing it, like corporations do it, but I still come to realize, no, I'm still too much in toxic masculine. I'm still like working from fear on a very subtle level, like not obviously, but, and yeah, your message was so beautiful, because I feel like for me, it's not, I think I won't leave social media, but some other shifts that I feel called to, and that also feel like a leap of faith. And yeah, your message was so beautiful. Like, I think if it's aligned with our soul and with the source or universe, it's gonna work out. Yeah. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time. I just
my pleasure.
Yeah, I just love listening to you. I also recommend your full moon and new moon classes. I love them. They come out and it's just, yeah, I just recommend it. And yeah, thank you so much for your time, Emily.
Thank you, Suzanne. I've absolutely loved talking with you. Really grateful to have this time with you.
Thank you very much for watching and listening to this talk. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Emily as much as I did. You will find links to Emily's work in the video description and also ways to contact me. My website is in German, but you can still contact me in English. Much love, Suzanne.